Everyone in the diner saw a screaming child and a bad father, but Caitlin saw something else. She didn't know the man in the corner was Silas Sterling, the ruthlessly private tech mogul worth $40 billion. And she certainly didn't know that the fragile boy in the wheelchair was the heir to an empire. When the boy began to convulse and the manager moved to kick them out, Caitlin risked her job to do the one thing nobody else would. She held him. She thought she was just comforting a child. She had no idea she was passing a test that would destroy her life and then rebuild it into something unrecognizable. This is the story of how one act of kindness exposed a dark secret and created a legend. The smell of the Rusty Spoon diner was a permanent fixture in Caitlin O'Connor's life. It was a mixture of burnt coffee, stale bacon grease, and the industrial lemon cleaner they use to mop the checkered floors. It wasn't a pleasant smell, but to Caitlin it smelled like survival. At 24 years old, Caitlin looked 30. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a frayed scrunchie, and dark circles bruised the skin under her eyes. She adjusted her apron, wincing as the receipt book dug into her hip. It was 11:15 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday in Seattle. The diner was mostly empty, save for a few truckers and the regulars who nursed cheap coffee to stay out of the cold. "Table 4 needs a refill, Caitlin. Stop daydreaming." The voice belonged to heavyset manager Beatrice. Beatrice didn't walk. She stomped. She was a woman who believed kindness was a business expense she couldn't afford. "On it, Bea," Caitlin said, her voice raspy. She grabbed the coffee pot, her wrist aching. Caitlin was tired. It wasn't just the double shifts. It was the crushing weight of the medical bills sitting on her kitchen counter at home. Her younger brother, Toby, had been born with complications that required constant therapy. Therapy that insurance stopped covering 6 months ago. She was 3 months behind on rent, and her landlord, Mr. Henderson, had given her a final warning that morning. Pay up by Friday or get out. The bell above the diner door jingled. A gust of wet, freezing wind swept through the room, making the napkin dispensers rattle. Caitlin looked up. A man entered, pushing a high-end, customized wheelchair. He was soaked. He wore a dark trench coat that looked expensive but was ruined by the rain, and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He was tall, broad-shouldered, but he carried himself with a hunch, as if the weight of the world was physically pressing on his neck. In the wheelchair sat a boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old. He was wearing noise-cancelling headphones and was rocking back and forth rhythmically. His hands were twisted slightly inward, a sign of cerebral palsy, perhaps, or severe autism. "Just coffee," the man grunted as they took a booth in the far back corner, away from the windows. "And, do you have gluten-free toast?" Caitlin approached the table. She noticed the man's hands. They were trembling, not from cold, but from adrenaline, or fear. "We have wheat toast, sir," Caitlin said softly. "But I can clean the grill specifically for it if he has an allergy. It'll take me a few extra minutes, but I can make sure there's no cross-contamination." The man looked up. For a second, Caitlin saw his eyes under the brim of the hat. Steel grey, piercing, exhausted. "You'd do that?" he asked, his voice rough. "My brother has a sensitive stomach," Caitlin lied gently. Toby didn't, but she knew it made customers feel better not to be the burden. "It's no trouble. What's his name?" She smiled at the boy. The boy didn't look at her. He was staring at the fluorescent light buzzing above the table, his rocking increasing in speed. "Leo," the man said. "His name is Leo, and I'm John." "Nice to meet you, John. I'm Caitlin. I'll get that toast started." As she walked away, she heard Beatrice hiss from behind the counter. "Don't waste time scraping the grill for a $3 order, Caitlin. Just put the bread in the toaster." He asked for gluten-free, B. If he gets sick, we get sued, Caitlin whispered back, knowing the only language Beatrice spoke was liability. Beatrice rolled her eyes. Fine, but if Table 6 walks out because you're scrubbing a grill, it's coming out of your tips. Caitlin went to the back. She spent 5 minutes scrubbing a corner of the flat top until it shone, then carefully toasted the bread. She cut it into triangles, just the way Toby liked it, and brought it out. When she returned to the dining room, the atmosphere had shifted. The quiet hum of the diner was gone. Leo was screaming. It wasn't a tantrum. It was a sensory overload meltdown. The buzzing light above their table had flickered, a sharp, staccato strobe effect, and it had sent Leo over the edge. He was thrashing in his chair, his guttural screams tearing through the air. He had knocked the sugar dispenser onto the floor, sending glass and white granules everywhere. "Stop it! Leo, stop!" The man, John, was trying to grab the boy's hands, but he was doing it wrong. He was panicking. He was trying to restrain the boy, which only made Leo fight harder. "Hey!" a trucker at the counter shouted, slamming his hand down. "Shut that kid up! People are trying to eat!" "Get them out of here!" Beatrice yelled, coming around the counter with a dish rag like a weapon. Sir, you need to leave. He's destroying my property." The man looked helpless. He was a big man, strong enough to crush anyone in the room. But against his son's distress, he was powerless. I'm trying," he stammered, his sophisticated veneer cracking. "Please, just give us a minute." "You don't have a minute. You're disturbing the peace," Beatrice barked. "Caitlin, get the check. They're leaving. Now." Caitlin stood frozen for a split second. She looked at the man's face. It was a look of pure, unadulterated shame. He wasn't ashamed of his son. He was ashamed of his inability to help him. Caitlin dropped her tray. She didn't grab the check. She walked past Beatrice, ignoring the manager's shouting. She walked right up to the booth. "Sir," she said, her voice commanding but low. "Let go of his hands." "What?" The man looked at her, wild-eyed. "He'll hurt himself." "He's fighting the restraint, not you. Let go." Caitlin knelt on the dirty floor, oblivious to the broken glass of the sugar dispenser cutting into her jeans. She didn't touch Leo. She just lowered herself until she was under his eye level. "Leo," she hummed. It was a low, resonant sound she used with Toby, a steady vibration. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small, squishy stress ball she kept for her own anxiety. She placed it on the table. Then she began to tap a rhythm on the table surface. Thump, thump, pause. Thump, thump, pause. Leo's screaming turned into jagged sobbing. He stopped thrashing. His eyes darted to her hand. "Deep pressure," Caitlin whispered to the father. "Do you mind?" The man shook his head, stunned. Caitlin moved slowly. She placed her hands firmly on Leo's shoulders. She didn't squeeze. She pressed down, grounding him. It was a technique called grounding compression. It told the nervous system where the body ended and the world began. "You're safe, Leo," she whispered. "The light is buzzing. It hurts. I know. We're going to turn it off." She looked at the man. "Give me your hat." The man blinked, then ripped the baseball cap off his head. Caitlin gently placed it on Leo, pulling the brim down to block the flickering light. The effect was instant. The screaming stopped. Leo slumped forward, exhausted, his head resting against Caitlin's shoulder. For a long moment, the diner was silent. The trucker who had yelled looked down at his coffee, embarrassed. Beatrice stood with her mouth open. Caitlin stayed there, on her knees in the sugar and glass, holding a strange boy in her arms, while his father watched with an expression that was impossible to read. It wasn't just relief. It was calculation. "I'm so sorry," the man whispered. The nanny quit this morning. I didn't know the light would trigger him. I haven't taken him out in public in 2 years." Caitlin smiled, brushing a stray hair from Leo's forehead. "It's not your fault. The world is loud. Sometimes it's too much." She carefully helped Leo sit back. "I'll pack the toast to go. You should get him home where it's quiet." She stood up, her knees bleeding slightly from the glass. She turned to Beatrice. "I'll clean this up, Be." Beatrice's face was purple. "You bet you will. And then you're clocking out." "What?" Caitlin paused. "I told you to give them the check and kick them out. You ignored a direct order in front of customers. You undermined my authority." Beatrice crossed her arms. "You're fired, Caitlin. Get your stuff." The air left Caitlin's lungs. "Be, please. My rent. Toby's meds. Should have thought of that before you decided to play nursemaid instead of waitress. Out!" Caitlin felt tears prick her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She nodded. She turned to the man, John, who was watching the interaction with narrowed eyes. "Here is your toast, sir," she said, handing him the box. "It's on the house. Take care of Leo." She walked to the back, untied her apron, and left it on the hook. She grabbed her coat and walked out the back door into the rain, not wanting the customers to see her cry. She didn't see the man stand up. She didn't see him pull out a black American Express Centurion card, the black card, and drop it on the table. "Charge me for the damage," the man said to Beatrice, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly cold register. "And add $5,000 for a tip." Beatrice's jaw hit the floor. $5,000? For the girl?" "No," the man said. "For the information. I want her full name. I want her address. And I want to know exactly why a woman with her skill set is working in a dump like this." "Who are you?" Beatrice whispered, shrinking back. The man put his sunglasses back on, despite the darkness. "I'm Silas Sterling," he said. "And you just made the biggest mistake of your life." 3 days passed. Caitlin was in a state of panic. She sat on the floor of her tiny, drafty apartment in the Lower East Side. Toby was asleep in the next room, the hum of his humidifier the only sound. On the floor in front of her were the classified ads, circled in red Sharpie. Dishwasher, night cleaner, telemarketer. She had called them all. No one was hiring immediately. Her landlord had knocked an hour ago, reminding her that tomorrow was Friday. Eviction day. "I can sleep in the car," she whispered to herself. But Toby can't live in a car. A heavy knock on the door made her jump. It wasn't the landlord's knock. That was usually a rapid, angry rapping. This was 3 slow, authoritative thuds. Caitlin scrambled up, smoothing her shirt. She opened the door to the length of the safety chain. Standing in the hallway was a man in a suit. He wasn't the man from the diner. This guy was older, with silver hair and holding a briefcase. "Miss Caitlin O'Connor." "Who's asking?" Caitlin said, gripping the door handle. "My name is Arthur Pendleton. I represent the Sterling estate. May I come in?" Caitlin frowned. "Sterling? I don't know any Sterlings. I don't have money for whatever you're selling." Arthur smiled, a kind, grandfatherly expression. "I'm not selling anything. I'm here to offer you a job." Caitlin undid the chain. Arthur entered the apartment. He didn't look down on the peeling paint or the mismatched furniture. He placed a black envelope on the table. "Mr. Silas Sterling was impressed by your conduct at the Rusty Spoon 3 nights ago." Caitlin's eyes widened. "The man with the boy? John? Mr. Sterling values his privacy. He often uses pseudonyms," Arthur explained. "He is the CEO of Sterling Tech, and he is in desperate need of a caregiver for his son, Leo. Caitlin felt a laugh bubble up in her throat, a hysterical, desperate laugh. I'm a waitress, Mr. Pendleton. I'm not a nanny. I don't have a degree in child development. We know, Arthur said. He opened the briefcase and pulled out a file. We know you were a nursing student at City College 3 years ago. We know you were top of your class, and we know you were expelled 2 months before graduation. Caitlin went cold. The blood drained from her face. If you know that, she whispered, then you know why I can't work for you. You know about the theft. Mr. Sterling is aware of the allegations, Arthur corrected. He is also aware that you handled his son better in 3 minutes than 5 certified specialists have in 5 years. Leo has rejected every nanny we've hired. He hasn't spoken a word since his mother died 2 years ago. But he let you hold him. Arthur slid the black envelope forward. Inside is a contract. It is a live-in position at the Sterling estate in the Hamptons. All expenses paid. Full medical benefits for you, and any immediate family. Arthur glanced at the bedroom door where Toby slept, including specialized care for dependents. Caitlin's heart hammered against her ribs. Medical benefits. Toby could see a specialist. And the salary? She asked, her voice shaking. $10,000 a month. Starting. Caitlin had to grab the table to steady herself. That was more money than she made in 6 months. It was freedom. It was life. But, Arthur added, his tone sharpening slightly, there is a condition, a probationary period, 2 weeks. If Leo rejects you, or if there is any incident regarding trust, you will be terminated immediately without severance. Mr. Sterling is extremely protective. He does not forgive mistakes. Caitlin looked at the envelope. She thought about her criminal record. The record that wasn't really hers, the lie she had told to save someone she loved. If Silas Sterling dug too deep, he would find the truth that the police had found, that Caitlin was a thief. But she looked at the eviction notice on the counter. She had no choice. I'll pack my bags, she said. The Sterling estate wasn't a house, it was a fortress. It sat on a cliff overlooking the ocean, a sprawling structure of glass, steel, and cold grey stone. When the gates opened for the black town car Caitlin was riding in, she felt like she was entering a prison, not a home. She was shown to her quarters by a maid who didn't make eye contact. Her room was bigger than her entire apartment. Mr. Sterling wishes to see you in the library, the maid said, then vanished. Caitlin walked through the silent halls. There were no photos on the walls, no flowers. It was sterile. She found the library. Silas Sterling was standing by the window, his back to her. He wasn't wearing the trench coat and baseball cap anymore. He was wearing a tailored navy suit that cost more than Caitlin's life earnings. He turned around. He was handsome, devastatingly so, but his face was hard. The vulnerability she had seen in the diner was gone, replaced by the armor of a billionaire. "Miss O'Connor," he said. His voice echoed. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Sterling," Caitlin nodded. "Thank you for the opportunity." "Don't thank me yet," Silas said, walking toward her. He stopped 2 feet away. He smelled of expensive cologne and ozone. "I saw what you did at the diner. You have a gift. But I also know you have a record. Grand larceny. You stole prescription drugs from the hospital supply room." Caitlin's chin went up. "I was charged. I pled guilty." "Why?" Silas asked, his eyes searching hers. "You don't strike me as a drug addict, and you don't strike me as a thief." "I did what I had to do," Caitlin said vaguely. She couldn't tell him the truth. Not yet. Silas studied her for a long, uncomfortable moment. "I am desperate, Miss O'Connor. That is the only reason you are here. But know this. I have cameras in every room of this house, except the bathrooms. I will be watching you. If you hurt my son, or if you steal so much as a silver spoon." He leaned in close. "I will destroy you." Caitlin didn't flinch. "I'm here for Leo, Mr. Sterling, not your silver spoons." A flicker of surprise crossed his face. He wasn't used to people talking back. "Good," he said. "He's in the playroom. Good luck. You'll need it. The current head of household, Miss Agatha, is difficult." Caitlin turned to leave, but stopped. "Mr. Sterling." "Yes?" "Does Leo have any toys, or just therapy tools?" Silas frowned. "He has the best educational developmental tools money can buy." "That's not what I asked," Caitlin said. "Does he have a teddy bear, a truck, anything just for fun?" "Fun is not a priority. Progress is." Caitlin sighed. "That's why he's screaming, Mr. Sterling. He's a boy, not a project." She walked out, leaving the billionaire speechless in his library. As she walked down the hall toward the playroom, Caitlin didn't notice the shadow lingering in the alcove. It was a woman, tall and severe, wearing a tight grey bun and a scowl. It was Miss Agatha, and she was holding her phone, typing a message. "New girl is here. She's trouble. Initiate Phase 2. The first week at the Sterling estate was a war of attrition. The enemy wasn't Leo, it was the house itself, and its general, Agatha. Agatha, the head housekeeper who had been with the Sterling family for 30 years, ran the estate with military precision. She believed in schedules, silence, and starch. Caitlin believed in chaos, noise, and play. "You are not to move the furniture, Miss O'Connor," Agatha snapped on Tuesday, finding Caitlin dragging a $3,000 Persian rug to the side of the room. "Leo needs floor space," Caitlin replied, not breaking a sweat. "He can't crawl on hardwood. It hurts his knees. And we're building a fort." "A fort?" Agatha looked as if Caitlin had suggested building a bomb. "Master Leo does not play with forts. He has educational tablets." "He hates the tablets," Caitlin said firmly. She turned to Leo, who was sitting in his wheelchair, watching her with wide, curious eyes. For the first time in years, he wasn't rocking. He was waiting. "Right, Leo? We're going to build a castle." Agatha pursed her lips until they were a thin, white line. "Mr. Sterling will hear about this destruction of property." "Good," Caitlin said. "Maybe he'll come join us." Agatha turned on her heel and marched out, her stiff uniform rustling like dry leaves. Caitlin turned back to Leo. She didn't treat him like a porcelain doll. She lifted him out of the chair and placed him on the pile of cushions she had gathered. She brought in textures, silk scarves, rough wool blankets, smooth river stones she'd found in the garden. "Touch," she whispered, guiding his twisted hands. "Feel that? That's safe." By Thursday, the breakthrough happened. Caitlin had brought in a can of shaving cream. She sprayed a mountain of it onto the pristine glass coffee table. Agatha wasn't in the room. "Make a mess, Leo," Caitlin encouraged, burying her own hands in the foam. Leo hesitated. He looked at the white fluff. Slowly, with trembling fingers, he reached out. He squished the foam. A strange sensation. Then, a sound erupted from him. It started as a wheeze, then a hiccup, and then a giggle. It was a rusty, unused sound, but it was undeniable. Leo was laughing. Caitlin's heart soared. She grabbed a handful of foam and dotted his nose. He shrieked with delight, slapping the table, sending cream flying everywhere, onto the velvet curtains, onto the carpet, onto Caitlin's face. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors swung open. Silas Sterling stood there. He was wearing a tuxedo. Behind him were 2 Japanese investors he was hosting for a $1 billion merger negotiation. The room went dead silent. The scene was a disaster. The playroom looked like a snowstorm had hit it. Caitlin was covered in shaving cream. Leo had foam in his hair. The expensive furniture was barricaded into a tunnel. Silas stared. The investors stared. Caitlin froze, her heart dropping into her stomach. "I'm fired," she thought. "I'm so fired." "What is the meaning of this?" Silas asked, his voice low and dangerous. Before Caitlin could stammer an apology, Leo looked at his father. He lifted a foam-covered hand and pointed at Silas. "Da! Da!" The room seemed to lose its oxygen. Silas took a step forward, his business demeanor shattering. "What did he say?" Silas whispered. "Da! Da!" Leo squealed and slapped the table again, laughing. Silas ignored the investors. He ignored the mess. He walked across the room, his expensive Italian leather shoes squelching in the shaving cream. He fell to his knees beside the table, ruining his tuxedo trousers. "Leo," he choked out. "Hi, buddy. Hi." Leo smeared shaving cream on Silas's cheek. For the first time, Caitlin saw Silas Sterling smile. It wasn't a media smile. It was a real, blindingly bright smile of a father who had just gotten his son back. "He hasn't spoken in 2 years," Silas said, looking up at Caitlin. His grey eyes were wet. "How did you do this?" "He just needed to be a kid, Mr. Sterling," Caitlin said softly, wiping foam from her arm. "Not a patient." Silas looked at her with an intensity that made her blush. "Thank you," he mouthed. From the doorway, the Japanese investors bowed respectfully, seemingly charmed by the display of humanity from the Ice King of tech. But in the shadows of the hallway, Agatha watched. Her knuckles were white as she gripped the doorframe. She wasn't smiling. She saw the way Silas looked at the waitress. She saw her control over the house slipping away. She has to go, Agatha thought. Tonight. The sabotage happened during the celebratory dinner that evening. Because the merger had gone well, Silas had invited Caitlin to join him for dinner in the main dining room. An unprecedented invitation for staff. Caitlin had changed into a simple black dress she owned, feeling out of place amidst the crystal and silver. Leo was seated between them, eating his special pureed meal. "You have a brother, don't you?" Silas asked, pouring wine. He seemed relaxed, his guard down. "I do," Caitlin said, tensing slightly. "Toby, he's with a sitter. You should bring him by sometime. Leo needs a friend." Caitlin smiled nervously. She couldn't tell him that Toby was currently alone in the apartment because she couldn't afford a sitter and the rent this month, even with the advance. She had set up a camera to watch him, but the guilt was eating her alive. Suddenly, Leo dropped his spoon. He began to claw at his throat. His face, usually pale, flushed a violent red. "Leo." Silas stood up instantly. "Leo, what's wrong?" Leo began to wheeze, a high-pitched, terrifying sound of air trying to force its way through a closing windpipe. "He's choking!" Silas yelled. Caitlin vaulted over the table. She grabbed Leo's face. His lips were turning blue. She checked his mouth. No obstruction. She looked at his skin. Hives were erupting along his neck. "It's not choking!" Caitlin shouted. "It's anaphylaxis. He's having an allergic reaction. What did he eat?" "Just his puree. The chef knows his allergies." Silas was panicking, freezing up again. "He's allergic to peanuts," Caitlin said, her mind racing back to the medical file she had memorized. "Where is his EpiPen?" "In the nursery. Upstairs." Silas turned to run. "No time!" Caitlin yelled. "He has 30 seconds before his airway closes." She looked at Agatha, who was standing by the sideboard, looking feignedly horrified. "Agatha, call 911, Caitlin commanded. Caitlin grabbed her purse from the chair. She ripped it open. Because of Toby, she carried a portable medical kit everywhere. She pulled out a generic epinephrine auto-injector. "Hold his leg!" she screamed at Silas, Silas grabbed Leo's thrashing leg. Caitlin uncapped the needle and jammed it into Leo's thigh. Leo screamed, a raw, ragged sound, but 10 seconds later, he took a giant, gasping breath. The wheezing slowed. The color began to return to his face. Silas collapsed into the chair, pulling Leo into his chest, shaking uncontrollably. "My God," Silas whispered. "My God." Then his fear turned to rage. He stood up, holding Leo, and turned to the staff. "Who did this?" he roared. "Who put peanuts in his food? The chef has been with me for 5 years. He knows the protocol." Agatha stepped forward. She reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out a crumpled wrapper. "Mr. Sterling," Agatha said, her voice dripping with fake sorrow. "I found this in the trash can in the kitchen. It's a Snickers bar wrapper." She turned her cold eyes to Caitlin. "And I saw Miss O'Connor eating one earlier while she was preparing Master Leo's tray." The room went silent. Silas turned to Caitlin. The warmth, the gratitude, the connection, it all evaporated instantly, replaced by the cold, hard stare of a prosecutor. "Caitlin?" he asked. "Is this true?" "No," Caitlin gasped. "I didn't. I don't even eat peanuts. I know how sensitive he is. I prepared the tray, but I left it on the counter for 2 minutes to go to the bathroom." Agatha was there. "How dare you?" Agatha hissed. "I would never endanger Master Leo. You, however, you are the one with the criminal record. You are the careless one. You nearly killed him with your negligence." Silas looked at the wrapper in Agatha's hand. Then he looked at Caitlin. "Get out," he whispered. "Silas, please listen to me." "I said get out!" Silas roared, his voice shaking the windows. "You're fired. Leave my house before I have you arrested for child endangerment." Caitlin looked at him, tears streaming down her face. She looked at Leo, who was watching her with confused, sad eyes. She knew she had been framed. She knew Agatha had done it. But she was a waitress with a record, and Agatha was the trusted retainer. "You're making a mistake," Caitlin whispered. She turned and ran out of the dining room, out the front door, and into the dark, rainy night. Caitlin didn't have money for a cab back to the city. The town car service had been cancelled by Agatha the second she walked out the door. She walked 3 miles in the rain to the train station, shivering, her black dress ruined. But she didn't care about the cold. She cared about the look in Silas's eyes. He had looked at her like she was a monster. She arrived back at her apartment in the Lower East Side at 2:15 a.m. She unlocked the door, dread pooling in her stomach. "Toby!" She rushed into the bedroom. Toby was there, sleeping in his hospital bed, tangled in his sheets. The machine that monitored his breathing was beeping steadily, but the red, low battery light was flashing. The power in the apartment was out. "Oh no," Caitlin whispered. She checked the breaker. Nothing. The landlord had cut the power. Even though she had the job, the check hadn't cleared yet. She grabbed her emergency flashlight. She had to manually pump Toby's oxygen if the backup battery failed. She sat by his bed, shivering, pumping the bag, crying silently in the dark. Back at the Sterling estate, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Silas sat in his study, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He stared at the security monitors. He couldn't get the image out of his head. Caitlin saving Leo. The way she moved, efficient, professional, desperate. If she was careless enough to eat peanuts over his food, he thought, why did she have an EpiPen in her purse? Leo didn't carry one in the house because the house was supposed to be a sterile zone. Why did she have one? He picked up the phone. "Arthur, wake up." "Sir?" The lawyer's sleepy voice answered. "I want you to pull the security footage from the kitchen between 5 p.m. and 6 p.m. Sir, the kitchen cameras are on a closed loop, but Agatha manages the servers. I don't care. Bypass her. Hack it if you have to. And Arthur, get me the full police report on Caitlin O'Connor, not the summary, the transcript of the interrogation. An hour later, Arthur called back. His voice was different. Sober. Sir, you need to see the video. Silas opened his laptop. The file Arthur sent popped up. It was grainy, black and white footage of the kitchen. He saw Caitlin preparing the tray. She was humming. She cut the fruit. She didn't eat anything. Then she wiped her hands and walked off screen. Seconds later, Agatha walked into the frame. Silas leaned closer to the screen, his breath hitching. Agatha looked around. She reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small packet, crushed peanuts. She sprinkled them over the puree. Then she stirred it in. She threw the wrapper in the trash can, the same wrapper she had presented as evidence. Silas felt a wave of nausea so strong he almost dropped his glass. She poisoned him, Silas whispered. She poisoned my son to get rid of the nanny. There's more, sir, Arthur said gently. The police report. Tell me. Caitlin O'Connor was arrested 3 years ago for stealing Dilaudid and specialized seizure medication from City Hospital. She pled guilty immediately. But I dug into the witness statements. Arthur paused. She didn't sell the drug, Silas. Her mother had stage 4 bone cancer. They were uninsured. The hospital had discharged her mother to die at home with nothing but Tylenol because they couldn't pay for palliative care. Caitlin stole the pain meds to give her mother a painless death. And the seizure meds, they weren't for her mother. Who were they for? Silas asked, his heart hammering against his ribs. She has a brother, Tobias. He has severe cerebral palsy and epilepsy. Same as Leo, but worse. She's been raising him alone since she was 21. The grand larceny wasn't a crime, sir. It was a rescue mission. Silas closed his eyes. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had fired a woman who was the only person in the world who understood his struggle, a woman who was working herself to the bone to keep her disabled brother alive, a woman who had saved his son while he stood there uselessly, and he had sent her out into the rain with nothing. Where does she live? Silas demanded, standing up. Lower East Side, tenement building on 4th. Get the car, Silas ordered. And call the police. Have Agatha arrested for attempted murder. I'm going to get Caitlin. The drive to the city took 40 minutes. Silas drove himself, his sports car tearing down the highway at 100 miles an hour. When he arrived at the address, he hesitated. The building was a crumbling brick structure with bars on the windows. It was a place where hope went to die. He ran up the stairs, ignoring the smell of mold and old cigarettes. He pounded on apartment 4B. No answer. Caitlin, he shouted. He heard a faint sound inside, a rhythmic wheezing. Silas didn't wait. He kicked the door. It was old wood. It splintered near the lock. He kicked it again, and it flew open. The apartment was pitch black. Caitlin? He used his phone light. He saw the living room, empty, save for a pile of unpaid medical bills on the table. He moved to the bedroom. He saw her. Caitlin was slumped over the side of a hospital bed, asleep from exhaustion. Her hand was still resting on a manual oxygen pump attached to a boy who looked just like Leo, only older and frailer. The machine next to the bed was dead. The power was out. She had been pumping air into her brother's lungs by hand for hours. Silas felt a lump in his throat the size of a fist. He walked over and gently touched her shoulder. Caitlin. She jerked awake, gasping, her hand instantly squeezing the pump. I'm awake! I'm awake! Toby, I'm here! She blinked in the harsh light of the phone. When she saw Silas standing there, wet and imposing in her tiny bedroom, she thought she was hallucinating. "Mr. Sterling?" she croaked. "What? Are you here to arrest me?" "No," Silas said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm here to save you." He looked at the boy in the bed. "Is this Toby?" Caitlin nodded, tears spilling over. "The power. The landlord cut it. The backup battery died. If I stop pumping, he stops breathing." Silas didn't hesitate. He pulled out his phone. "Arthur, I need a mobile ICU unit at this address in 10 minutes. And get the power company on the line. Buy the damn building if you have to. Just turn the lights back on." He hung up and knelt beside Caitlin. He reached out and placed his large hand over hers on the pump. "Let me," he said. "What?" "Let me do it. You're exhausted. Let me pump." You're a billionaire," Caitlin stammered. "You don't do this." "Tonight," Silas said, looking deep into her eyes, "I'm not a billionaire. I'm just a father who knows what it's like to be scared." He gently took the pump from her hand. He began to squeeze it, finding the rhythm instantly. Squeeze, release, squeeze, release. Caitlin watched him, her body shaking. She finally let go. She leaned her head against the mattress and wept. Silas sat there on the dirty floor of a cold apartment, keeping a stranger's brother alive with his bare hands, while the woman he had wronged cried beside him. For the first time in his life, Silas Sterling wasn't just watching. He was part of the family. The street outside Caitlin's crumbling apartment building was bathed in the strobe light chaos of red and blue. It wasn't the police coming to evict her. It was a fleet of private ambulances, their logos gold and discreet. Sterling Medical Logistics. Neighbors peeked out from behind barred windows as paramedics in tactical gear, not standard EMT uniforms, swarmed the building. They moved with the precision of a SWAT team. "Stabilize the patient," a doctor barked. "Get him on the transport ventilator. We're moving to the estate." Caitlin stood in the hallway, dazed. She was still wearing her ruined black dress from the dinner, her feet bare on the dirty linoleum. She watched them lift Toby, her fragile, precious brother, onto a stretcher that looked more like a spaceship pod than a medical bed. She felt a heavy weight settle on her shoulders. Silas had taken off his tuxedo jacket and draped it over her. "Come," he said, his hand guiding her back. "You're not staying here. Not tonight. Not ever again." "But my stuff," Caitlin whispered, looking at the few boxes of books and the old photos of her mother. "We'll have it packed and moved," Silas promised. "Right now, you need to be with your brother." As they walked out to the waiting town car, a man in a greasy tank top came running down the stairs. It was Mr. Henderson, the landlord. "Hey, what's going on here?" Henderson shouted, spotting Caitlin. "I told you, O'Connor, no power until you pay the rent. You can't just bring a circus in here. I'm calling the cops." Silas stopped. He turned slowly. The rain was still falling, slicking back his hair, making him look severe and terrifying. "Mr. Henderson, I presume?" Silas asked. "Yeah. Who are you?" Silas reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek, black phone. He held it up. "I'm the new owner of this building. I bought it 5 minutes ago while I was waiting for the ambulance." Henderson's jaw dropped. "What?" "I bought the building," Silas repeated calmly, "and the one next to it. I'm going to demolish them and build a state-of-the-art free clinic for children with neurological disorders." Silas took a step closer, towering over the landlord. "Which means you are trespassing on my property. You have 1 hour to vacate the premises before I have security throw you out." Silas didn't wait for a response. He ushered Caitlin into the leather back seat of the car, shutting the door on her old life forever. The return to the Sterling estate was different this time. The gates didn't look like prison bars. They looked like arms opening to embrace them. When they entered the main hall, the atmosphere was electric with tension. But it wasn't directed at Caitlin. 2 police officers were standing at the bottom of the grand staircase. Between them, handcuffed and looking smaller than she ever had, was Agatha. The head housekeeper's bun was unraveling. Her face was a mask of shock. She had thought she was untouchable, the gatekeeper of the Sterling Empire. When she saw Silas walk in with Caitlin, her eyes narrowed into slits of venom. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Sterling," Agatha spat. "She's a thief. She's a nobody. I was protecting Leo." Silas stopped. He looked at the woman who had raised him, and then tried to destroy his son. "You weren't protecting him," Silas said, his voice echoing off the marble walls. "You were suppressing him. You wanted a doll, not a boy. And when he started to get better, when he started to laugh, you couldn't handle losing control." He walked over to the side table, where the security footage was paused on a tablet. He turned the screen so Agatha could see herself, poisoning the puree. "I saw the tape, Agatha. Attempted murder, child endangerment, filing a false police report." Agatha's face crumbled. The arrogance vanished, replaced by fear. "Silas, please. I've been with this family for 30 years. And that is the only reason I'm letting the police take you out the back door instead of the front," Silas said coldly. "So the press doesn't see you in cuffs. Goodbye, Agatha." As the officers led her away, the house seemed to sigh. The heaviness that had hung over the estate for years, the strict rules, the silence, the coldness, evaporated with her. Caitlin shivered, the adrenaline wearing off. She swayed on her feet. Silas caught her before she fell. He swept her up into his arms, carrying her bridal style. "I can walk," she murmured weakly. "You walked 3 miles in the rain tonight because of me," Silas whispered into her hair. "You're not walking another step." Caitlin woke up to sunlight streaming through sheer white curtains. She was in a bed that felt like a cloud. For a moment, she panicked, thinking she had overslept for her shift at the diner. Then she remembered. "Toby!" She scrambled out of bed. She was wearing a silk pajama set that someone had laid out for her. She ran out of the room and down the hall. She found them in the sunroom. It was a sight that stopped her dead in her tracks. The sunroom had been converted into a makeshift hospital ward, but it didn't look sterile. It looked magical. The medical equipment was tucked away behind screens painted with jungle animals. Toby was in a specialized bed, propped up, his eyes open and alert. He was watching a large TV screen. Next to him, in his wheelchair, was Leo. And sitting on the floor between them, wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants, was Silas Sterling. Silas was holding a controller. "Okay, Toby, look. If I press this, the car jumps. See?" Toby, who couldn't speak, made a happy, gurgling sound. He tapped his hand on the bed railing. Leo laughed, that same rusty, beautiful laugh from the shaving cream incident, and clapped his twisted hands. "Da! Car! Zoom!" Leo shouted. Caitlin leaned against the doorframe, tears streaming down her face. She had spent 5 years fighting the world alone, fighting for every pill, every doctor's appointment, every breath Toby took. And here, in this sun-drenched room, the fight was over. Silas looked up. When he saw her, his face softened. He put the controller down and walked over to her. "How did you sleep?" he asked. I don't know," Caitlin stammered. "Silas, this room, the equipment, how much did this cost?" "Does it matter?" Silas asked. "Yes, I can't pay you back. I have negative $12 in my bank account." Silas sighed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the contract Arthur had given her, but it had been amended. Red ink was everywhere. We need to renegotiate your employment, Silas said seriously. Caitlin's stomach dropped. You're firing me again? No, I'm promoting you. He handed her the paper. I'm firing you as a nanny, Silas explained. I'm hiring you as the Director of Specialized Care for the Sterling Foundation. Your job is to oversee Leo's development, but also to help me build that clinic I promised Henderson I'd build. He pointed to a line at the bottom. The salary is $200,000 a year, plus full tuition for medical school. I know you were kicked out, Caitlin. I had Arthur contact the Dean of City College this morning. With the evidence of why you took the medication and a substantial donation from the Sterling family, they have agreed to expunge your record and reinstate you. You can finish your nursing degree, or go for your MD. Whatever you want. Caitlin stared at the paper. The numbers blurred. Why? She whispered. Why are you doing this? Silas took her hands. His thumbs brushed over her knuckles, which were still red from the cold and the cleaning work she used to do. Because you did the one thing $40 billion couldn't do, Silas said. You saw my son. You didn't see a disability. You didn't see a problem to be solved. You saw Leo. He stepped closer. The space between them was charged with electricity. And, Silas added, his voice dropping to a murmur, because when I saw you fighting for your brother in the dark, I realized I didn't want you to ever be in the dark again. Caitlin looked up at him. The billionaire. The Ice King. He looked just like a man who was afraid of being lonely. I don't know what to say, she said. Say yes, Silas replied. Yes, Caitlin breathed. Silas didn't kiss her. Not yet. It was too soon. Instead, he pulled her into a hug that was tighter and more desperate than anything she had ever felt. He buried his face in her neck, breathing her in. Thank you, he whispered. Dada! They broke apart. Leo was waving his arms. He was pointing at the TV. Zoom! Zoom! Silas laughed. He took Caitlin's hand. Come on. I think the boys want a rematch. Caitlin sat on the floor beside the billionaire. She picked up a controller. She looked at Toby, who was smiling at her. A real, relaxed smile. She looked at Leo, who was glowing. For the first time in her life, Caitlin O'Connor wasn't surviving. She was living. But the story wasn't over. The press had gotten wind of the incident at the estate. The police cars, the ambulances, the arrest of the socialite housekeeper. The world wanted to know who the mystery woman was. And Silas had one more twist up his sleeve, a public declaration that would cement her place in his world and challenge the elite society that had looked down on them both. The weeks following Agatha's arrest were a whirlwind of flashing cameras and screaming headlines. The Seattle Chronicle ran the story. Billionaire's housekeeper arrested for poisoning air. But the story everyone wanted to read was about the mystery woman, seen entering the estate in the middle of the night with a medical convoy. Inside the walls of the estate, however, a quiet revolution was taking place. Caitlin wasn't just working, she was evolving. True to his word, Silas had fast-tracked her enrollment into medical school. Her days were a chaotic, beautiful mix of pharmacology textbooks, physical therapy sessions with Toby and Leo, and late-night dinners with Silas. The dynamic between them had shifted. It wasn't employer-employee anymore. It was a partnership. But there was one final hurdle: the world outside the gates. I need you to come, Silas said one evening, finding Caitlin in the library. To the annual Sterling Gala. Caitlin froze. Silas, I can't. I don't belong there. Those people, they look at bank accounts, not people. I'm just a waitress who got lucky. Silas walked over and took her hand. You're not a waitress. You are the woman who brought my son back to life. I'm tired of hiding you. I'm tired of facing that room alone. Please. The night of the gala, The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was dripping with diamonds and malice. The whispers began the moment the doors opened. "Is that her? The nanny? Look at that dress. Who is she trying to fool?" Caitlin walked in on Silas's arm, wearing a gown of midnight blue velvet. She held her head high, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. She felt the judgment of 500 socialites pressing in on her. Then it was time for the speech. Silas took the stage. Usually he gave a dry update on stock prices. Tonight he stood silent for a long moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," Silas began, his voice projecting without a tremor, "you all know my net worth, but none of you know me. For the last 2 years, I have been the poorest man in this room. I had $40 billion, but I couldn't buy a conversation with my own son. I was drowning in a house of gold. A pin could have dropped in the room. I thought strength was about walls," Silas continued. "I was wrong. Strength is about opening the door. 3 months ago, I met a woman who was overworked and on the brink of losing everything. But when my son screamed, she didn't turn away. She risked her job to hold him." He turned and looked directly at Caitlin. The spotlight shifted, bathing her in light. "She taught me that money is not power. Kindness is power." Silas beckoned her onto the stage. As she ascended, he took her hand in front of the city's elite. "Tonight, I am announcing the dissolution of the Sterling Family Trust. It is being replaced by the Leo and Toby Foundation for Neurological Advancement, and it will be run by its executive director, the future Dr. Caitlin O'Connor." The applause started slowly, then built into a roar. But Silas didn't care about the crowd. He leaned in and kissed Caitlin, a deep, claiming kiss that told the world he didn't care about their rules. He loved the waitress, and he was never letting her go. 5 years later, the sun was setting over the Sterling estate. The cold grey stone was now covered in warm ivy, and the silent lawns were littered with toys. Dr. Caitlin O'Connor stepped onto the patio, still wearing her stethoscope from her rounds at the free clinic down the road. She looked out at the lawn and smiled. Toby, now 16, was zipping across the grass in a high-tech motorized chair, chasing a golden retriever. Running beside him, actually running, was Leo. It had taken 5 years of surgeries and the groundbreaking treatments developed at Caitlin's clinic, but Leo was walking. His gait was a loping run, but he was fast. "Wait up, Toby!" Leo shouted, his voice clear and loud. Caitlin felt strong arms wrap around her waist. She leaned back into Silas's chest. "They're fast today," Silas murmured, kissing her cheek. "It's the sugar," Caitlin laughed. "You let them have cake before dinner." Silas turned her around. His hair was grayer now, but his eyes were lighter than they had ever been. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a ring made of twisted gold, resembling the messy loops of shaving cream from that first night in the playroom. "I know we're already married," Silas whispered, "but I wanted to give you this, to remind you. You didn't marry a billionaire, Caitlin. You married a dad, and you gave us a life." Caitlin slid the ring onto her finger, tears in her eyes. "I love you, Silas. I love you, Dr. Sterling." As the sun dipped below the horizon, bathing their family in gold, Silas smiled. He still kept the old receipt from the rusty spoon in his wallet. Item number 1, toast. Price, $1.50. Value, everything. Caitlin started that night with negative $12 in her bank account and a heart full of fear. She ended up with a family, a purpose, and a love that changed the world. It's easy to look at a screaming child or a struggling stranger and turn away. But Caitlin shows us that one moment of compassion can unlock miracles we never imagined. You never know who you're helping. That burden might be a blessing in disguise. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button. It really helps us share these stories. Don't forget to subscribe and tell us in the comments, have you ever helped a stranger who changed your life? Thanks for watching.